Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a quick tutorial on rounding using a number line. Now, one of the most important things you need to start with is making sure you have a nice, neat number line drawn on your paper. I can usually, if I'm holding my paper this way, I can use a ruler and get about 3 number lines nice and neatly drawn. If I'm holding my paper the tall way, I can usually get about 5 number lines. Okay, so I have 3 lines drawn. I'm going to give a place for my first benchmark, my last benchmark, and my midpoint on these number lines. Okay, so let's start with the first number line and let's keep it nice and simple. Let's say we are going to round the number 267 to the nearest 100. Okay, as always, I write down my number nice and close. I underline the place to which I'm rounding, which is the hundreds place. The first thing I need to do is create my benchmark. I know my lower benchmark is going to start with the number 2 and have 2 zeros after it. It's the lower 100 underneath 200. And the 100 that is above 200 would be 300, which is my higher benchmark. My midpoint is going to be halfway between 200 and 300. I know it's going to have the magic number 5 in it. And based on what Mrs. Anderson told us today as a hint, the 5 is always going to come right after the number we underlined. So my midpoint is 250. Okay, now what I need to do is decide where on my number line would be 267. Sometimes I like to draw in the notches of counting by tens. So for example, I have 200. This would be 210, 220, 230, 240, 250, 260, 270, 280, 290, and 300. All right, so 267, I know it's going to be near the 260s, going to be kind of close to 270. I think 267 would fall right in that area. So now I need to decide, is my dot closer to the 200 or closer to the 300? And I can tell just by looking at it that it is closer to the 300. So when rounded to the nearest 100, 267 rounds to 300. All right, let's do one that's a little bit harder now. Instead of 267, I'm going to do 3,491. But I'm still going to round it to the nearest 100. Okay, so rounded to the nearest 100, that means I'm going to underline my hundreds place value. All right, well, when I underline a place value that is not the greatest place value, any place value that's greater than what I underlined is going to stay the same for my benchmarks and my midpoint. So I know my 3,000 is not changing. I'm going to put that in for all of my benchmarks and my midpoints. All right. Then I'm going to look at the 4. Well, if I was just thinking about the number 491, my lower benchmark would be 400. So my lower benchmark is going to be 3,400. My higher benchmark would be just 500. So I know now it's going to be 3,500. And halfway between 3,400 and 3,500 is going to be a number where I have a 5 in the tens place. So I'm going to keep my 4. 3,450 is halfway between those two numbers. All right, now what I need to do is decide where would 3,491 come on this number line. Well, 3,491 is not in between 3,400 and 3,450. It's actually 3,491. 450, 60, 70, 80, 90. I think it would be right about here. That would be where my 3,491 would fall. Looking at that, I see that it's very close to 3,500. So I know when I'm rounding to the nearest hundred, 3,491 would round to 3,500. All right, let's try one more. All right, and figure out a more challenging one. I'm going to make this one a super challenge. The number is 92,628. And I'm going to say round it to the nearest 10. So that would mean I'd have to underline the number in the tens place. The tens place is the 2. Now, just like I did in the example before, all of these numbers before it that are larger are going to stay the same. So 92,600 something. I'm going to keep them the same for both of my benchmarks and my midpoint. So now if I'm thinking about tens, I'm going to cover up all this. What is the 10 below 28? I know that 10 below 28 would be 20. So instead of just writing 20, I'll have 92,620. I know the 10 above 28 would be 30. So I'd have 92,630. Now I got to figure out what is between that 20 and 30. Halfway would be 25. So I'll have 92,625. Now, where would 92,628 go? 92,621, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. I think it would be right about there. So if I'm rounding 92,628 to the nearest 10, it looks like it's much closer to 92,630. I hope this is helpful for you rounding with number lines. If you have any questions, you can email me. You can also take a picture of your work and show me what you did in terms of rounding with number lines. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.